Hey everyone, so this is going to be a bit of an interesting video, but it all started from this comment here. So, this is Mario Genova. They comment on nearly every wrestling video I do, and I always like seeing them, I'm not going to lie. Every time I post a wrestling video, it's nice to kind of know that there's at least one person out there who's going to dig it. It's a weird sense of fulfillment I get to have from these videos. But their comment here wanted me to compare a referee from a Hasbro line as compared to like the bone crunching line. And I think that was an interesting idea. I didn't know how to really make that a full video though, so I had the idea. Why don't we look at a history of managers, announcers, and referees across every major WWF toy line and just how they changed up. Keep in mind, this is not like a comprehensive list. I'm not saying I have every single referee or announcer figure ever made, but that's the general gist of this video. We're looking at managers, referees, announcers. Not wrestlers, but the people who make wrestling what it is. Because it's not just the grapples and the things going on between the ropes, you know? First place you gotta start is with the first WWF toy line ever, that being the LJN line. And again, I'm working with what I have. The only managers that I have that can stand up on their own are Captain Lou Albano and the fabulous Freddie Blassie. I adore this fabulous Freddie Blassie figure, by the way. As you can see, LJN actually had a really smart way of doing this. Keep in mind, the LJNs, these figures are amazing. Like, they're all unique sculpts. They all capture the proportions and personalities of these wrestlers so well. But the idea was they made the managers and the announcers and the, well, they never did a referee, but they made the announcers and the managers noticeably smaller than the wrestlers and gave them, at times, worse proportions. So you can see with Macho here, right? He's jacked, he's tall. He's actually one of the smaller LJN figures, Macho is. But even he still towers over managers like Captain Albano and Freddie Blassie, even though Albano in real life, I'm pretty sure, was taller than Macho. Alongside that, whereas Macho, they gave these abs made to look absolutely spectacular, you can see with characters like Blassie and Albano, they made them look a little bit more true to life, a little bit more with a gut. And that was all because these guys were supposed to be big personalities, but not big figures. I'm saying big figures in terms of, like, big, muscular figures. I think this is probably the best way to go about it. Eventually, Mattel would go a similar route, because Mattel, of course, does realism. But when it comes to the early days of wrestling figures, I think this is the single best attempt in terms of just generally scaling these managers and referees to their wrestling figures. Now, we're going to talk about Hasbro adjacent and Hasbro redo lines in a minute. The Zombie Sailors, the Hastels, we're going to circle back. But in terms of the vintage Hasbro line, there were no managers, there were no referees, and there were no announcers. To me, that is the single biggest sin of that Hasbro line. Still one of my favorite toy lines ever, but they could have used that personality. That said, technically, there is one manager figure that you could use if you want to stretch it. If you have either the normal or the green-suited $1 Million Man, he was a manager, and he can work with your $1 Million Corporation members. So, Tatanka, Bam Bam Bigelow, handful of other guys. He works as a manager, even though, yeah, this is definitely a cheat. The next major WWF line was the Jakks Bone Crunching Action, my second favorite wrestling figure line of all time. And as you can see, what they did here was the managers, they would still have their usual proportions. They were still usually a bit shorter or a bit pudgier than proper wrestlers. I pull in Flash Funk just because Flash Funk is great. Now, they did a lot more than just what you see here. They had a whole line of managers. I just have Clarence Mason and Jim Cornette out because they were the easiest ones to grab off the shelf. Alongside that, I have a couple more to show off. I actually have Jim Ross in box, and I'm going to track down the referee figure they did. But for right now, this is just to give you a general idea. Basically, whereas the Bone Crunchers, of course, are rubber and have a little bit more posability, the managers, announcers, referees, they all had purely plastic bodies, which make them less playable and yet more durable. Alongside that, characters like Jim Cornette would occasionally get accessories like his headgear, whereas Clarence Mason wouldn't get any accessories, but he would get things like a pointer finger, something that you couldn't do on a lot of the other Bone Crunchers. So again, the answer really was to make them shorter, make them a little bit pudgier, but also they completely changed the materials used. Yet you can't really tell that from afar. I didn't tell you that that one has rubber and those two are made out of pure plastic, I bet you could look at that and kind of convince yourself, yeah, they're all made using the same material. But it also means that these guys hold up a lot better over time. Next up, I'll be honest, for me, this is the worst wrestling toy line of all time, at least major wrestling toy line. It is the Jakks Titantron Live figures. They look bad, they pose terribly, they just don't really work all that well for me and what I want out of an action figure. But you can see here, they started going a different direction. They wanted to give better proportions to figures, but it was still really wonky. So you have Vince McMahon, who would have been a manager figure, and yet he towers over Steve Austin. He looks bulkier because of the suit. And don't get me wrong, you could definitely make the body that Vince was more muscular than Steve Austin, but he wasn't taller, and he wasn't necessarily more swole than... Well, I mean, he was more swole, but he wasn't exactly, like, bigger than Steve Austin. Steve Austin still had a lot of muscle underneath that beer gut of his. It's just... I don't know, man. Like, you can see a difference in scale here. I don't think it's intentional so much as just they were reusing every part they could, and it came out looking pretty rough. We are now in the days of the Jakks Ruthless Aggression when we finally get classic superstars. Keep in mind, there were managers all over the place in the Jakks lines. I just have Paul Bearer out because him and Jimmy Hart are the only managers I have from the classic superstars line, and Jimmy Hart's in worse condition. But basically, all the managers used basically the same body. So, sure, you got a cloth shirt here, but you can see they gave Paul Bearer washboard abs. So every manager all used this body. There were a handful of exceptions, like Captain Lou Albano. He had, like, his shirt on, but, like, he still used the pants, and he still used, like, the torso bit. Basically, they would remove the arms, and they would give, like, sometimes you'd have the jacket, sometimes not, but you would always have this torso and these legs on every manager figure. So they were all more or less the same, but some of them look decent. Some of them, like Paul Bearer, Gorilla Monsoon, they look really bad. So, you know, mixed bag, which you can say that for a lot of Jakks figures, you know. Just saying, I put him in with this Bret Hart because to this day I think that's one of the best Bret Harts we ever got. Eventually, Jakks got the F out, and, well, quite frankly, so did WWF, and we got Mattel's WWE line. Now, they've done so many referees and managers over the years, I just have a handful of examples here to show different eras. So, here's Bobby the Brain Heenan. This came in a Target exclusive 4-pack, still one of my favorite figures that Mattel's ever done. I think this is their best Bobby the Brain. It looks really, really nice. He's using what was at the time a unique body to him, though eventually there came the suited body, the Build-A-Figure body. If we get managers nowadays, they're usually going to be Build-A-Figures like Dangerous Dan Davis here, who was not a manager, but he was a referee. We've got a few referees over the years as well. There's a new Build-A-Figure of a referee that just came out recently. I can't remember his name. It was something... His name sounds like John Cena. That's all I really remember. But you can see, pretty decent. You have great articulation. It scales very well with your wrestling figures. He's not as articulated or as large as those guys, but he's a Build-A-Figure, so it still works. And if you're a big Hart Foundation fan like I am, you need a Dangerous Danny Davis. And then here's one of the more recent ones. It is Consultant Rick Rude. You need this for an NWO or a DX shelf. He's another Build-A-Figure. He's using the same Build-A-Figure body, it's just they added the tie and the jacket. If we get wrestlers, or rather managers or referees nowadays, they're using this body 9 times out of 10. Though, of course, we did just recently get a Paul Bearer. I still have him on pre-order from Ringside. Haven't seen him yet, but this is what Mattel eventually got us, right? So, more realistic, more close to form, more detailed, and yet just a little bit less fun. At least when I'm still thinking of the Jakks and LJN managers and referees. And then, of course, Mattel does the Mattel Retro line. Mankind is here just for scale. Basically, when they started doing these 4-packs for Mattel Creations, we got this, Mean Gene Okerlund. I praised this figure when it came out. I still really like it. But this body, they've reused multiple times now. Every referee, every manager that we've gone from Mattel Creations, they all look the same. They all have the same exact body. They all come with one prop that they hold in their hand exactly the same way. They all have the same gimmick. But we've gone Paul Bearer. He doesn't... Yeah, he looks good. I can't bring myself to say I dislike that Paul Bearer, even though I don't think that's as good as a Paul Bearer could have been. Jimmy Hart is bad. I just don't like how he looks at all. They recently did a Muhammad Ali in a similar style. That's the newest gift pack. it's a thing where they found one body, kind of like the Build-A-Figure body for the Mattel Elites, and they're going to run into the ground because it works for managers and referees. It gives you a suited body, but, you know, I do want to see more variety on a Hasbro shelf, which is why we're now going to get into the other Hasbro continuation lines, which is where I'm most excited to see referees at the time being. Zombie Sailor has just been absolutely spoiling us with referees and managers. Of course, we got Slick, we got Todd Pangill for your announcing team, we got the greatest, or at least the most famous referee of all time, Earl Hebner. We're going to get a Downtown Bruno before too much longer, which of course is going to give us a Harvey Whiffleman. These guys are the best. Like, Zombie Sailor, them and Hastel, they're the ones that are really competing to be my favorite wrestling toy line right now. I think they're both great in their own ways. The one-man gang is just here just for scale. You can see, again, they don't necessarily have a unified body type or a unified scale, but they are usually shorter than the wrestler figures, and I think that's the best thing. I do think that these guys should just be a little bit smaller to help convey the enormous nature of the wrestlers, you know? So, a very good selection. And then for Hastel, I have to sing praise for the Men on a Mission trio once again. This time, I just have Oscar and Mabel down. Mo's still on the shelf, but I think the Oscar is perfect. He matches with his guys so well. And if this is going to be the history or the future of managers in these Hasbro lines, I think that's perfect. Give them their iconic looks. Try to pair them up with their iconic teammates or their iconic stable members. It is the best way to go about this, and it led to one of my favorite moments in toy collecting ever, really. Just getting the Men on a Mission team in full in the Hasbro line. They look so good together, and I don't think I would have liked Mabel and Mo as much as I do if we didn't eventually get the Oscar as well. Hayabusa. So the reason I'm pulling Hayabusa in, this is just to kind of talk about the upcoming future. Epic Toys, the former Cella, they have a Mike Chioda coming out. Looks like this. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good figure. I just wanted to throw that out there since we're doing this big video, you know? But, of course, we don't have anything yet. So there you have it, a very brief overview on how every major WWF line treated their managers and referees and announcers. Not the most auspicious video I've ever made, but a fun one. And Genova, I hope that this was kind of what you were looking for. Thank you for watching all these wrestling videos, and yeah, thank everyone else for watching as well. Let me know what you think. I don't know if we're ever going to do a video quite like this again. I just figured, hey, I had time in the schedule. Why not shoot something?